going to be making a card, and I'm going to be using this gorgeous Joanna Sheen Giordano rubber stamp, and this particular one I'm using is the baby bunny. I've already stamped it out and I've used Stays On Black ink. I've got this lovely set of watercolours from Royal Langnickel, and so we've got those lovely colours, pretty. So we're going to get going with that. Okay, so now I've started to speed this up a little bit, and I thought it would be easier to do that and then talk over the top. So excuse me if my voice sounds a little wobbly. I don't have a microphone. So we've just started with the little birdie in the corner there, and I'm just mixing some colours together of my brown, my yellow and a little bit of white to make a slightly warmer shade. And you can see where I've put a little bit of yellow into the tummy of the bird and the sort of paler brown in his face, and I'm just adding a little bit of pink to his beak and to his cheek there to get a little blush to make it just look a bit cute, which I think is quite sweet. Now we're going to be moving on to the leaves. Oh no, I'm just finishing the top of the bird. It's been a while since I actually recorded this video. I should think it's been near a year since I actually painted this, and it took me a couple of months before I even put the image into a card. But so it's trying to come back and remember exactly what I did. It's quite interesting for me to see it now. Anyway, I'm using a grey blue. I'm literally taking my blue and some black and also a little bit of red in there. You can just see it near the top of the leaves there. It's just to give it again a little bit of warmth. Obviously you don't really go around seeing many blue leaves, but I'm using the design packaging to give myself a colour guide on exactly what I want to do. And you can see me leaning across there, and I'm just picking up my colours. I'm using the lid of my paints as like a little palette, and you can see I've just added a little yellow and then just a slightly bit more of the darker blue, just to really add some dimension. And you can see it's quite wet. It is watercolour and it is really quite wet, and that's what's quite nice, because you know, you can layer it. You can let the first layer dry and then you can add another layer, or you can work with it, do a couple of layers quite wet and let it really kind of almost sort of blend together in a quite sort of smudgy way, which is nice. So we're just laying down the base colour there of the blue. Now adding a little bit more intensity, and you're just following where the natural shadow lines would be, and it's easy to see quite often with the stamps. And to be honest, you know, just use your common sense. It's going to be darker underneath things, you know, like under the bird it'll be darker, and the bits under the leaves will be darker. But as I said, I was using the packaging as quite a good guide, and you know, it's not meant to be a life drawing, it's a illustration of it. I mean, as I said, you're not going to probably go around seeing many blue leaves, so don't get too hung up on it. As you can see, I've gone back to the other leaves now, and I'm just adding a little bit more depth of colour in the middle there, and just gradually building it up and building it up. Now this is sped up twice, so 2 times, and I've got it on the stop frame, so it didn't make you feel like you were completely whizzing before your eyes. So you can imagine I mean, I think it's going to have probably taken me 3 or 4 hours to have painted. And now we're just moving across to the centre, and I'm just making that a little bit softer, using the water to really make it just a little blush of colour. And then again, just going back nearer where the design is telling us that's the centre of the leaf, and just adding a little bit more darkness. You can see it's a little less muddy, it's a more purer blue. And there I'm just adding a little bit of pink, probably red actually, but with the mixing of the blue in there, it kind of turns lilac-y pink. I've just left that half there. I presume I'm going to go back and fill that in with another colour. I was just darkening up those little pieces again. I'm going in with the pink again, or the red. I've probably, oh, and there you see I just put a bit too much, so just using my finger to take the excess off, or you could use a little bit of tissue, or as you can see there, I'm using my paper almost as the palette and transferring some of the colour across to the next leaf. But what I imagine is that I would have used the blue on my palette and added a little bit of red just to make the pinky colour, so just enough blue so that it's not gone purple, but enough to change the red to that pinky shade. Okay, and now we've got this gorgeous kind of limey yellow. I would imagine that's again just the almost 90% yellow with a small amount of the green added, and now we're adding a little bit of red, which will turn it kind of a rusty orange colour, because obviously you're mixing the two primaries, which will make the orange. And then the gorgeous little ladybug coat, I think, will come next, although I might do some more work on this leaf. I'm obviously just mixing up some colours here. Oh, I'm just going back to the bird. So just lightening down that bit a bit. Just about see it in the picture. I'm just trying to add a little bit more pale colour in the centre there, just to lighten his little face a little bit. Obviously didn't realise I was slightly out of shot, so sorry about that. And then I'm just bringing round like a little ring of the darker colour to really emphasise that pale area. And that was the advantage of letting that dry. We could then go back in and add, and obviously the different paint, the paint rather will change in how it works depending on how much water you add. So you can use the same colour, like here I'm using the dark black paint, but it's almost like a pasty paint rather than a watercolour paint, because we've hardly put any water in it. Okay, and our gorgeous ladybird. And here we've got our red, and it looks like I've done that pretty much pure, maybe a tiny bit of yellow in that, just to give it a more orangey red tone rather than a pinky red tone. And again, going back in now with a darker red, just to add the shadowing. And again, even though it's watercolours, it really still is, like your markers, it's still about layering and layering. And you can layer, as I say, while it's wet, or even when it's dried up a bit, like we did the face of the bird. But you can see there where there's just that little pale bit in the centre where it would be the highest point on our ladybird. So that's going to be the lightest point. The points most receding are the points that will be the darkest. We're just adding some black to the little dots. And his head. Okay, now moving on to the next bird. Now I've just twisted the image around a bit so that you can see easier. And I've obviously learnt from the previous one, and I'm putting the pale colour on his face straight away, because I want that to be important. Now that will be a mixture of white, yellow, and a little bit of the brown, a very small amount of brown, just to make that sort of creamy tone. And then you can see I'm basing the bird in the yellow, and then I'm adding a brown, which is the brown colour mixed with yellow to get a kind of warmy colour. And then just gradually feathering that brown in. and you'll probably hardly see any of that yellow when it's finished, but it gives a base to that, and it comes through. Um, it's a bit like when you colour with your markers, and I think you may have seen me when I've done like my house mouse, and you still put the pink in even under the fur because it shows through. You know, he would have skin under there, so you would put that in, and this is just like the under feathers would be this warm colour. I think I probably found these birds almost the most hard part of the whole thing to get how I wanted them to be, because they're so tiny, um, and yet you really needed the detail to make it work. And I knew what I wanted to achieve, and you know, I'm not an expert painter. I don't watercolour very often, so trying to work out what to mix together and how to achieve the result I wanted was quite fiddly, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was fun to do. And at the end of the day, you know, you can pretty much, if it's still wet, you can water it down quite a lot and put back, you know, pretty much take a lot of the colour out. I mean, certainly I think when I made mistakes, I just um, almost sponged it off with some paper napkin, and it took so much of it off that it left enough for you to be able to correct that. And just putting his eye in. And by kind of going around the edges quite softly, it makes him look kind of fluffy, which is cute. And then on the branch, we're just dabbing in the dark colour in places, and then we're going to go back with the softer colour. So again, even though it's just a thin branch, it gives it shading, and it all helps with the overall image to give it shape and shading and life, really. Every little bit counts. Not sure what I'm doing there, but I guess I was trying to correct something I wasn't happy with. Perhaps we're picking up some colour. Okay, so we're doing the leaves again. And this is that very like china blue, really, isn't it? It's very, I really like that shade of blue. Yeah, I think that must be where I was mixing the colour, which is a bit annoying for you guys, sorry about that. And then we're just shading, as you can see, one half of the leaf darker. And I liked how, we're adding a little pinky colour there, I liked how the paint would puddle, creating kind of dark sort of sections where it puddled up. Um, I thought that was a nice effect. Just another layer, just layering up again, darkening that again, and the same on the others. And you can see how by layering it up you really get the dimension. Obviously under his tummy and where he's sitting it's going to be darker, and then under where the leaf is folded away, and also where it's shaded underneath the other leaves. Again, just adding a little of the pinky colour, and it's almost can't be seen And then I'm just mixing up some colours there. So what are we mixing? A little brown, a little white, and a little yellow. More white. And you can see how I mixed a little bit, that I made it up, and then I did one half, I added a bit more white to. So then I end up with two shades that are essentially the same shade, but one's just lighter. So it's a bit like your Copic markers, you know, you've taken the same number and same colour family, but you've just gone, you know, 01 and 02 or whatever. And there we can see you picking up the darker colour and then going in the paler. You know, it's like I'm painting really brilliantly because you've got the stop motion on the speeding it up. It looks like I'm painting without the brush going in the places that the paint's going down on its own. But you can see again, I'm just thinking and looking at the shape of his little cheek and where the lightest part would be. So the lightest part would be the puffiest part of his face, and the darkest part would be the part that's receded the furthest back away from the light, which is obviously around the line where it meets into his fur. So we're just adding the darker colour there, and on his eye it will be darker in that eyelid because that will be the part that's receded furthest away from the light. And as you can see with his ear, the same at the base of the ear, that's the deepest part of the ear, so the deepest part will have the furthest away from the light. Now we're just starting to add the fur, so I'm wanting like a darker ring slightly further away because his fur is going to be mottled. And then you can see I'm adding a warmer tone there with a little yellow just to give him that shade. And then just blending the brown fur up into his ear, which I don't know if you can see clearly on there, but it was indicated on the stamp that there was fur going into his ear there, so we just made sure that we did that. And I've used the same brush throughout here, I haven't changed my brush size, and I have to be honest, I don't remember the name of the set, but it's not sable, I think it's a tackle-on brush, and it's very nice to use. So you can see it's quite an intense brown going on right now. I'm just trying to decide exactly where I want that colour to be. And then quite dark in the centre there of that ear, because that ear is behind the other ear, so it is going to be a lot darker. And you can see as it's drying, it's kind of, the colours slightly blend into each other again, rather like our markers again. So that means that you might want to go over and just define certain parts. And I'm getting the more intense colour by using less water, and you can see it wasn't really puddling. Now we've got the softer colour and it's more watery, and you can see the water going on. You can see I'm moving that watery paint around, and it gives a really nice effect. And the other thing that's really nice is that it's not like the markers where you have to stay working in the one section. You can go back to it, because as soon as you add water onto the paint, even if that area is dried, it will start to move again, because the paint will come back alive with the water. So it does mean that you haven't got the panic of making sure that you're working as quickly as you would with the markers, which is fun. You can see I've left the front of that ear pale, because that's the part that's going to be hitting the light, and it's almost going to have almost very little fur on that front piece, and it will be almost sort of skin. Not literally, it will have a very fine layer of fur, but also the light will be hitting it. So again, I'm just now doing his eyelashes to really emphasize the eye, and then inside his actual eye itself, just to bring that to life. And you can see already that just brings that absolutely to life. And that would be a mixture of black, mostly black, with just a small amount of brown. You don't usually want to use just pure black, because that is quite harsh, and very little things are absolutely pure black. You can see here how we're just layering and layering. And it was almost easier when you do the next part that's the same sort of thing. It's almost easier because you kind of worked out a few steps you might be able to miss, because in order to get to a certain point, quite often you've tried a few things and you haven't liked, well, you've liked it, but you've got there perhaps a longer route than you needed to. So sometimes you can make it a bit shorter the second time, the second section around, which is quite good. I mean, I guess if you're an expert painter, you probably know what you're doing anyway, but as I'm not. And that was just a pale part under his body there, and that's would still be shadowed, but it was a pale part of his markings. So it's kind of just striking a happy balance there. So we're really mainly putting down a base here with a few different shadings, but just putting down a nice base of colour in this kind of warmy brown. Okay, so I'd obviously just got a bit too much water there and move that off. Okay, so we're starting to add some shadowing now. And not only, and there's quite a lot of fur markings on here, so that's a good way of using for directionals of your stroke of your brush. But also I was trying to define things like, because he'd got little front legs in there, and making sure that those were clear, that that was a leg and that was his little tummy, etc. So it was kind of doing that, and also still keeping definition of his fur markings and trying to get him kind of fluffy, because he's obviously just a little baby. The other thing you must watch is that you don't smudge, because when I first started I was thinking, well, where do you start? And I guess really it became to me that you kind of started at the top and worked your way down. And you can see that a couple of places I'm just using my finger, and I've put down a colour, and then I'm using my finger not only to lift some of the water, but to lift some of the colour off as well. And you can see the little pale patch that I spoke about earlier that's under his chin. I've just added a little shading on that, so it still looks like it's pale fur, but it's obviously shaded. And again, we're just trying to add definition. And I think, you know, this was quite fiddly to do to get it how I wanted it to be. To try and show all those elements of his little feet and legs and things. And those little bumps at the front that look like they're little paws, like on a teddy bear, they're actually mushrooms in front of him. So I'm not missing out a section of his body there. That is just, as I say, the mushrooms. Okay, so I'm just mixing some colours here off camera. And cleaning my brush, etc., because I think Bunny's now finished. And you can see as it's drying, you can see the shape of his front leg. Oh, there we go, we're just mixing the red for his nose. The shape of his front leg is kind of diagonal from just under his chin, and you can just begin to see, and then the back leg as well, etc. So you can just begin to see it coming together there, really, as it starts to dry. I'm just adding a little red colour in his ear there, which you might think initially might look a bit strange, but because it's a yellow base, and you've also got some brown on my brush as well, it's just softening that from a bright yellow. And I'm sorry that's slightly off camera for you. Now it looks like it's really strange on the camera because you can see the wet a lot clearer than in life. It kind of shows up a lot more. So when you see it on there, that kind of wet patch, once that dries, it'll be absolutely fine. So now we're on another birdie, and I think this one, being our third one, might be a bit quicker. So I hope by 3 that I know what I was doing with them by now. Kind of getting a routine. And this time it's like I decided to forget the base of yellow. I either literally decided it or I just literally forgot it. I'm not sure which. Let's pretend I did it on purpose. So that sounds much better, I think. And we're just adding a little warmth. You see there where I just put water on and it just pushed the colour that I didn't want out the way, and just softened that yellowy colour to make it kind of tanny. Just adding a little more tone there. And it's such a cute image, and I love Joanna Sheen anyway, and these Giordano stamps are absolutely gorgeous. Now I know this particular one is actually designed to be cut up, but and the little bird at the side and the twigs and things around the top are actually kind of separate stamps, but I just really like the layout, so I just thought, what the heck, let's leave it as it is. I just thought it looked really nice. As I said, this was done quite some time ago. As you guys know, I do film quite a lot in advance, but not only did I not complete this card, I completed the painting, but I didn't complete the card for some time. But part of that was because I just could not find it for some reason. I put the bunny away in a safe place, and I couldn't think where I'd put it, and I finally came across it, and it was still underneath my craft mat, my glass mat, with some in between papers that I put it there to kind of flatten it out, which And I'd been looking in all sorts of places, but I didn't, I saw the papers, but I didn't think to look in between the papers. So anyway, so it was probably still finished. The actual card was probably finished about 5-6 months ago. But because I do generally film quite far in advance, it sometimes takes longer for these things to come through. And I do have certain videos that queue jump, because otherwise they kind of miss the trend slot, or if it's something that's new out, there's no point me showing a new out 6 months too late, so they will jump the queue. And also sometimes I just forget what's what order. But also now I've started doing videos twice a week. That's meaning I'm getting through my pre-recorded ones a little quicker. And although I've got the film, I haven't edited all of them, so I've got about 20 or 30 still to edit. So you've got plenty to keep you going. You can see again here we're just adding a little of the red and then we're tapping it off. And it's just adding some nice tonal feelings to that leaves and area, and it's gently bringing in like the colours of the ladybirds and the nose and stuff of the bunny. It kind of brings it all together. It's not kind of all of a sudden there's just one red bit in the middle. And I've obviously decided that I want a little bit more on that set of leaves, just give it more definition, which I can see that would work. And as it dries, I think you just appreciate where it needs a bit more work. And I think what it is that my paint is to the right, as it were, in front of the picture, over there, and my little lid, which I'm using as a palette, is at the top of the picture, or to the left of the bunny, up there, which is why I'm going in two different directions. Now we're just doing, I've got a little bit of blue on my brush, and I'm picking up the pinky colour. So it's mostly blue, but it's got a little bit of the pink. Adding just a little dimension. And I think, personally, all these details, it's worth taking the effort. It's not a lot more work. It makes it more pleasurable at the end, because the finished work, the devil's in the detail, I guess, because if you get every little bit with the dimension on and it all comes together and has an overall impact. You might not particularly notice that tiny little leaf, but if you left that and then you left another one, and all of a sudden you've got 10 or 12 things that are just little on their own that you've left, and then the whole image is, overall doesn't look as finished. So it might seem I'm taking a lot of effort on those. Okay, so now we're just jumping ahead. I think I'd pretty much finished on those little leaves. They look like I just left them to dry. I think this picture was done over quite a few days. I just would do a little bit and then let it dry and then move on to another bit on another day. So now we're just starting on my gorgeous yellow flowers. So there's a few in different places. So I'm just going to be, while I've got a particular colour on my brush, I'm going to be darting around. And you can see on his ear there, look how that pinky colour, the red I put in, has really blended through and given a really nice look. But anyway, going back to the flower, now we're adding a little bit of red in with our yellow, just to add some layering, and same here, you can see, so the top of that centre of the flower will be lighter than the sides. Again here we're just adding, where the flowers have curled over, they're getting colour on there, and in the centre. And I'm obviously going to be doing that other flower in a different colour. You can see how that's coming through, and now we're getting even more of the red, so it's looking quite orangey because we're mixing it with the yellow to give, so red and yellow obviously creating the orange, and then by adding that through there we've suddenly got depth to our flower. You can realise that those ones are behind. And then a really intense colour for those stamens in the flower. And then back to this side. You can see it's a very fine brush. Obviously just mixing up some colour. Because I'm not, a watercolourist, it's hard for me to know as I'm working what will be the right consistency for what I'm trying to achieve. So I tend to underdo rather than overdo, because it is easier to correct something that's less, because you can always add more. Although with watercolour it is more simple than some mediums to correct. Now we're starting on this big flower, so that's basically I've taken a white and I've added a smallest amount of the red to it to create this whitewash of pinky, peachy pink. It's because of the white base. If you just did the pink, then you wouldn't get the creaminess to it, but because, the red, but because we added it to the white and then the water, it's got this gorgeous kind of cream base to it, and it's just laying down the first layer. And now you can see there, that would be the red with a small amount of the white, but a little bit more red and a lot more water compared to the other one. The reason I know that there's a small amount of white is because it's pink rather than red, but it's mostly the red and water. And again here we're just trying to get a natural, kind of like you would get a flower that's two-tone, and trying to convey that. I tried this angle so that of the camera to try and hope that you guys would be able to see a lot better what's going on, because so my hand's not in the way so much. I know it kind of means the picture's off tilted a little bit, but I thought that would be better than the other way at the time. You'll have to let me know what you think. So now we're going even more intense on the pink. You'll notice there that my nails are different, so it obviously had a gap. So now I've got pink nails as well. If I recall, I think on this occasion it had been in a gap of maybe a couple of weeks, or at least a week. And in that sense, this is unusual because I don't normally take that long to make a item and finish it off. I normally complete it sort of within the same couple of days, but I just got involved with other projects, I think, and I had commissions to complete at that time, and I just didn't get the opportunity to finish it initially. As I said, and then I lost it. That's the problem when you put things in a safe place. They're really putting the pink around that cushiony centre of that flower. I think I'm doing something there off camera, which is a bit annoying. Sorry, guys. There we go. Well, I think I must have been mixing colour actually, because there's nothing changed. So less water, more colour to get that more definite line. You can really see the colours layering up and building up. Now we've got a real intense colour for the centre coming by the looks of it. So pretty. I really like that colour, and it's really defining our flowers. And look at it there, and it seems obviously like quite a bit of work for just a couple of little flowers, but I really think it makes such a difference. I don't know if you guys agree, but it's nice for me because I haven't seen it for a while to see it back, and because the card's been sold by now, I haven't even got it to look at anymore. So it's quite interesting for me to see it. And you can see there I just topped off a little bit of my paint, and it's just left a little wipe section, which again just adds dimension. And what I'm doing is essentially adding water, and then by using my finger that's lifting the colour out. I obviously didn't like it as it was, and okay, and we're just working on that little flower up the top there, which I'd obviously debased in that pale colour as well. Again, using the water to push the colour away. And that's, I think there must be a pink in my paints, because I think that's too vibrant for me to, and consistent in a colour for me to be mixing that each time. I can't remember now what's in there. To be honest, I have to say, since I'd got my watercolour pens, the lovely zigs, I haven't used the paints. And seeing this makes me want to go back and use them again. That beautiful vibrant blue in the centre of that flower, and just by using the water and letting it puddle more over one side, that's created the dimension and the shadowing. Adding a little bit more pink. Whoops, a big blob went on there. Again, using my brush to move and pick up the excess. I think I quite liked it before I did that, but I guess it would have flooded. And here we go, we're adding a bit more, which is what I liked in the centre. There we go. more blue to really emphasise that. Now I know I had a couple of shades of blue, a paler blue and a dark blue in the palette. It's just so intense. Real midnight blue. Now we're just doing some blue leaves. And again, that's a very slightly different shade to how we did before. It's more picking up the blue in the centre of the flowers. It's still in keeping. There we go, bringing a little bit more of that grey colour, but it's sort of blending the two sections together. That is a seriously loaded brush, wasn't it? There we go, that's better. And that's so pretty, that kind of delicate light blue, I like that. And then on the floor we've got some fallen leaves and branches, twigs and things, so we're just doing those as well. And that's kind of matching up with the ones at the top that were more delicate. So again, bringing that all together. And putting a little bit of the pink in there. And I really like that effect. You wouldn't expect that to work. I don't know if you guys think it does, but I think it looks really effective. I'm actually liking the blue leaves as well. I think that looks really effective. Shade plants don't do that really. I'm sure there must be something exotic that does have that sort of leafing, but I don't imagine you see many of them on the English countryside. Bit of the pink. And I just like the way that really blends together and again brings all those shades together really nicely. Oh, look at the little chickadee at the top there. He looks so cute with his little pink cheek. Sorry, I'm being distracted. Okay, so we're putting a bit more intensity on that. And this sort of pink colour, I am mixing a little of the blue and a little of the pink on the palette, and then just getting quite a bit of water on there as well, mixing that in to get quite a watery consistency to add into our blue that's on there. And the way I did that is the same as I showed, I think you saw briefly before, was where I make one puddle of the blue and then sort of one half I'd add a little bit of the pink to it and the other half I would use as the blue, and then you know the base blue colour is exactly the same, so you're not going to get any sudden weird contrasts. And now we're just adding a bit of yellow, so we've got the orangey leaves coming down on the bottom there like we had some at the top. And these are our mushrooms. So we're just starting underneath part, and that's quite a yellowy base to start with. Just filling in a few little flowers. Now we're adding the next layer of quite a soft watery brown, and you can still see the yellow coming through, but also it means that as you you can make it darker. As you can see, you can make it puddle at the bottom there and make it a darker part of the brown where the shading would be. And I did enjoy doing these mushrooms. So you can just see now there's even a sort of reddier brown being put on just up in that left side. Sorry, it's very slightly off camera there. You can see I used my finger there just to take that off the edge where it had gone on the edge that I didn't want it to. So we still had some of those layering showing through. And then even darker, because as you think about it, the underneath part where we are now on the mushroom can be almost like a real rich brown, but also with that kind of creamier colour showing through as well on the actual stalks and through the browny part of the mushroom. There you can see where I've really added some darkness in that part that where the stalk of the mushroom would be actually going right deep inside the actual canopy. And now our first and probably only green leaf. So just adding some shading, and you can see that what I've added there is quite a grey green uh, rather than a bright green, and what that's doing is tonally bringing it in line with the kind of grey blues, so all of a sudden it's not completely contrasting to the blues, it's all blending together nicely. And then I'm just doing his whiskers, which could have been a dangerous thing to do really over that plant. I'm not sure I would have done that now. Oh, you could have been too nervous after you've done all that, can you imagine? If that had gone wrong. Oh gosh. Now we're bringing some paint for our gorgeous mushrooms. So we're starting out with a pinky reddy, almost browny grey, sort of a dirty, watery colour for the top of the mushrooms, the canopies. As I say, I think these were almost my favourite thing to do on here. You can see it is quite a dirty red, it's not pinky red, it's not like really fresh. And now we're bringing in a reddier red, slightly towards the orange shade, And you can see I'm very slightly leaving a little gap. Oh, and there's a ladybug, ladybird as we say, and again using that, you can see again I've just left a small gap. Well, I did, and then I just covered it up by mistake. There we go, uncovered it. You can see it must be a very fine brush to be able to go in that small area. And by kind of removing it rather than leaving it and then doing it, it's making it a softer, more natural blend into that paler colour. Just mixing up some more colour. Again, just the same shade but just even more intense than before, and we're just gradually going slightly further back each time so that the colour from before is just a little bit of that showing, and then we'll go to the next one. Now here I'd finished everything and I'd just done a pink wash over the whole lot. That was a little risky because obviously there was a danger of marking the other pieces, but I thought it was worth it. Okay, so it's been a little bit of time since we painted this picture, and I've now just put together the actual card itself. So as you can see, I've cropped down the picture, and I've just taken my corner chomper at the 1/4 inch and I've chomped the corners there, and also you can see there's a lovely gloss on the picture. And what I've done is, once it's completely dry, and this is like probably a couple of months later now since you actually saw me painting this, I just used the Crafter's Companion Spray and Shine, and I've put a couple of coats of that on to really give it that lovely glossy finish. And then I've mounted it on this blue card here. This is all Hunky Dory cardstock, and then on this darker kind of butterscotch colour, and then onto this sort of even slightly paler colour, just to bring out all the colours. And then I took, before I put this layer down, I took a piece of ribbon, just lovely pink ribbon, silk ribbon, and wrapped it around, tied it in a knot. I then put my picture down, stuck all of this down onto the actual card itself, and then I took some lovely little silk flowers and I just bunched them up around the bow, and also put this lovely little ladybird on the actual knot using all my gel glue. And then I thought, just to finish it off, I put some more of the flowers around the top edge, top corner there, just to balance it and just to make it look really, really pretty. Okay, so then on the inside I've just put this insert on, and I've just stamped one of the little birds in the corner here and just lightly coloured it, and then I've stamped Happy Birthday, and obviously because he's a little bunny rabbit. So that's the finished card. I hope you've enjoyed making this card with me, and I'd love to hear your comments, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!